few notes. We have some press here. So if you don't, if you want to ensure not to be caught on any cameras or tape, you can sit in the back rows behind this camera here, MCAT's camera. So if you want to move, feel free to do that. All right, so welcome to the Missoula LGBT Committee for Accountability Mayoral Forum. Thank you. Thanks. All right. So tonight we are going to direct questions to Missoula's mayoral candidates John Engen and Luann Crowley. Thank you for coming. All right. Before we begin, I would like to thank some people and businesses that have helped make this possible. We've had so much generosity. Sherry Lee, Katie Dickinson, Andrea Olson, Carol Schneider, Casey Charles, David Wilson, Dave Van, Pamela Stoneham, and Bridget Carson. Thank you all for your help in putting this together. I also want to thank Denny's Coffee Stop, Allegra Printing, and The Bridge, of course. Thanks for letting us host it here. It's a great space. So thanks to all those businesses that have helped us out. I'd also like to mention that Bridget has index cards, and if you guys want to ask any questions, please feel free to write your questions on the index card. We probably won't have time for everyone's question, but we'll try to get to as many as we can. Lastly, we want to remind everyone that there's a sign-in sheet at the front of the theater. Now, if you're interested in helping us follow up with this, I mean, this is just the first step. We're going to talk to these candidates and get their ideas, and we want to follow up with them once elected with their ideas and make sure that we can make some of these happen. Some of these things happen, get some basic protections for gays and lesbians, and make sure that Missoula is a much safer place for all of us to live. So, as far as how we're going to do this is, tonight we'll be asking the candidates 8 questions of interest to the LGBT community. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer their question, and 1 minute each for a rebuttal. The next question will follow the same format with an alternating order between the 2 candidates. After the 8 prepared questions, we'll then move on to the candidates to allow them to ask any question they'd like of one another. Now, this is not limited to LGBT issues, and neither are the questions from the audience. Please feel free to ask anything of the candidates. With the 8 prepared questions, we're hoping that we cover a lot of the issues that are of concern to the LGBT community. Of course, if we don't, make sure to ask those, but feel free to ask whatever you like. So, and finally, I am going to turn it over to Spider for the first question.
All right. Thank you both for being here. Luann, on your website, you say, quote, "The future depends on people who see what can be rather than what is, and who are willing to work to make it happen. Together we can create a vision for the future and a plan for getting us there." John, on your website, you say, "We live in a vital, beautiful city that needs strong leadership and a mayor who can build bridges among our concerned citizens." With this in mind, and considering that tonight's event concerns lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgendered issues, as mayor, what do you think your role will be in creating a community not only accepting, but proud of its LGBT citizens? Will you take an active leadership role in preserving the rights and safety of Missoula's LGBT community? And do you have a plan for addressing institutionalized homophobia where it exists in Missoula city agencies? And Luann, you can start.
I don't think I addressed our timing mechanism. So our timing mechanism is right down here in the front row, and she is going to be timing you guys. We've got 4 hankies. We've got...
the 4 hanky system, sure.
We've got, of course, yeah. The green hanky will allow you to talk your little hearts out. And then we're going to move on to the yellow hanky, right?
Green means 1 minute.
Green means, I'm sorry, 1 minute has elapsed. Yellow is 30 seconds has elapsed. And orange means, red, orange is, yeah, okay. Orange is 15 seconds, and of course red is stop. So that's our hanky system. So without further ado.
Now I can remember the question, right? Well, I think I'll address it as best I can remember it and see what John comes up if he can remember the question. What's your vision? And how do we get there? And I think tonight especially, we want to talk about tolerance. When the folks were, or the young men were beaten up, most people the next morning said, "How can that be? That's not Missoula." And what the general community came to know is what you've known all along, that underneath our layer of tolerance, there's a lot of violence and there's a lot of intolerance going on. And that's what we want to change. That's why I invited the Assistant Chief of Police this evening, for him to hear and learn about what your issues are. The LGBT community needs to feel assurance. They need to know that their next mayor will be accountable, will take a leadership role in reaching out. I have said that I will be an advocate for Missoula. And that's for neighborhoods, that's for the business community, and that's for the LGBT community. I think you have already attained a goal here. By having this forum, the fact that the police have already responded by setting up a liaison with the LGBT community, that's something that your activism has achieved, and you need to be congratulated on that.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm just going to watch for the red flag at this point. Excuse me. I think the mayor's responsibility is largely the same as a citizen's responsibility in our community. And that is, I think we need to be fair and reasonable and tolerant. And I think I've done that as a city council person and as a citizen. And in my own small way, I've attempted to advocate for this community and lots of others. When there was an initiative drive in the state to make sure that marriage was between a man and a woman, my wife and I hosted a phone bank in our business so that Christopher and others could be there making phone calls to suggest to folks that that wasn't a great idea. And while that effort wasn't successful, I think it was important. I think it's important that the next mayor is fair, and I demonstrate fairness, I think, just about every time I run a committee meeting, when we talk about land use planning, which can occasionally be contentious in our community, as you may have guessed. Folks are tense, angry, and sometimes don't like each other, but we maintain civility and we try to move forward fairly. In terms of sensitivity and our efforts to protect folks, we're working, I think, hard with police, and I think we're lucky to have a progressive police force. And the fact that Mark's here tonight, I think, is testament to that. Some other things we'll talk about later will also testify to that.
All right, thank you both. Now, what's that? Oh, right. Would you like to respond, Luann?
Sounds good.
Okay. We'll get this down yet. Oh, you do want a rebuttal or not?
No.
Okay, great. I thought you said yes.
He needs
All
a
right.
hanky.
I do. Okay, so recently there was a brutal assault on two men just down the street here. Now, even though the perpetrators were screaming anti-gay slurs at the men, and the young men themselves have come forward that they believe it was a hate crime, police have not classified the incident as a hate crime. Many believe that ignoring the issues of homophobia and refusing to classify such assaults as hate crimes sends a message that lesbians and gays are appropriate targets for violence. As mayor, what will you do to ensure the safety of all of Missoula citizens? Are you in favor of a local hate crime ordinance? Why or why not? And John, you'll have the first crack at this one.
Pardon me. One of the young men who was beaten is among my many barista in town, Wally. Very kind young man. He didn't deserve to be beaten. No one deserves to be beaten in our community, and no one deserves to be the target of hate. I've had some conversations with folks in law enforcement and also folks who prosecute crimes, and their suggestion is that hate crime legislation doesn't necessarily pack any more of a punch, but I'm not necessarily opposed to considering such legislation. The fact of the matter is, we need to ensure the safety of all our citizens, no matter what the circumstances of the attack are.
You know, it's interesting. As a woman, I know what it feels like to be tolerated. I know the difference between that and living in an environment of tolerance. And we have to be upfront and honest about the fact that this community is being targeted. And this community needs to feel the assurance and the support of the mayor's office in knowing that they receive respect, that they receive the backing of the mayor's office. And the way that works is you sit down with the police force, you sit down with the chief, you sit down with the people who are the representatives, you identify specific issues, and you talk them through. And you start working towards a policy. I think the liaison is the first step, but you start working towards a policy that puts everybody on equal footing, and you start saying, when there are problems, we have a way, we have identified a mechanism that people no longer feel that they don't have a voice, that there's a way to say, we've got a problem, let's set up a meeting, and it happens on a consistent basis till you feel like, all right, I can trust this, and I know it's going to work. It isn't always going to be what I want, but I know I have a way now.
Do either of you want a rebuttal?
I was just going to say that I generally tend to prefer consistent action to additional conversation. I'd like to make sure that we're working these issues every day.
You have to build relationships. Consistency is key. We know that in dog ordinances. We have to be consistent. But you have to establish who's going to be consistent, and you have to establish how it's going to happen so people don't feel, for instance, I know people are saying, what's that policeman doing here? You know, we need to know who Mark is. And then you start. I mean, I believe the consistency and action right away is certainly fine. But there doesn't seem to be a relationship, and that's the first step.
This next question is very long. It will be the only really long one, I'm sorry.
Okay.
But here we go. This recent assault is not the first incident involving LGBT citizens that the city has handled in a way troubling to our community. In the case of the arson against 2 lesbian plaintiffs in the Snetzinger case, for example, County Attorney Van Valkenburg made public a probable cause document that accused the lesbians of burning down their own house, and then made the director of Pride a person of interest in the case. No charges were ever brought against Carla Grayson and Adrian Neff, and no apologies were ever made, even though the county attorney's office made these unproved allegations on the front page of the Missoulian. In the case of Jennifer Pate, this transgendered individual was consistently referred to as Billy Joe during the coroner's inquest. Her trans status was never mentioned, and her death was not even classified as a homicide, much less as a bias crime. As a result of these instances and more, many people in Missoula's LGBT community have lost faith and trust in Missoula's justice system, and thus many, if not most, crimes against us go unreported. On a positive note, as of last Thursday, as you said, there's a new LGBT liaison position at the police department whose role, as defined by the MPD, is to improve relationships between the GLBTI community and the Missoula Police Department. And the police department has recently re-explored the idea of participating in sensitivity training, although they have been slow to follow through, claiming lack of funding as their primary obstacle. As mayor, what will you do to make both the police and county attorney's offices more sensitive to the concerns of LGBT citizens? And will you work with the city council to make sure the police department gets the funding needed to proceed with the sensitivity training?
I was thinking about that on the way over when I had heard that the training had only gone down 1 or 2 layers, and I wasn't aware that there wasn't any money in the budget. I think that's vital, and that we could definitely make that a priority. I know the Native American community worked for a while with the police department, and they were able to offer our police department training. We worked on domestic violence training. This will be another step, and this is where we need to put our money. You have to put your money where your mouth is. You have to say, I'm not just going to say this, but I'm going to show you that I mean it. I think we need sensitivity training for the city council, maybe, to understand that this is a priority for our citizens. And that's fine. The city council can be educated just as the mayor's office and the police department can be educated. And I think once we're educated, then it's up to us to respond and say, we're going to make this a priority. Obviously, there's a need that has not been answered, and we will now respond.
I think that we need to make sure that we balance priorities. And we have to be careful that everything isn't a priority because nothing gets done under those circumstances. I think sensitivity training is terrific. I'm glad that our police department has begun to engage in that. I had a conversation with the sitting mayor today, and we talked a little bit about the department actually having a consultant come in and help through some of these issues as well, both internally and externally. I'm missing large parts of that long question. Can you hit me with the highlights one more time?
I'll just give you the last part. As mayor, what will you do to make both the police and county attorney's offices more sensitive to the concerns of our LGBT citizens? And then will you work to get the money for the sensitivity training?
Okay, I am going to encourage the folks who are sitting in this audience, the folks in the community who are interested in advocating for these issues and many other issues to call and to contact the police. Spider, during the course of that question, at one point you said, the community has lost faith and many of these crimes go unreported. I can tell you that the police have told me again and again and again that they cannot act if crimes aren't reported. And we have to share that responsibility. My experience with our police department, my experience with most city departments, in fact, is that when we work cooperatively, when we collaborate, when we work together, we actually have some more luck and we make some more progress. And I'd certainly encourage members of the community to report any crime or behavior that's even suggestive of a crime so that we can start tracking and start making some sense and maybe make these issues a priority. Because if they're not reported, I can guarantee you they won't be a priority. I'm happy to hear about them as a city council person and try to help you take action. I'd certainly be in the same boat as a mayor. One of the things, in addition to sensitivity training, that we might be interested in funding is simply continuing to fund our police department adequately so we have eyes on the street. That's extraordinarily important. We've done a pretty good job over the last couple of years in our last two budgets by putting more officers on the street to address these issues. In terms of sensitivity training, I have no idea what the price tag might be. That's a piece of this puzzle as well, but we have a resourceful department. We have a terrific Office of Planning and Grants, and I can't imagine that we couldn't put our heads together and come up with the dough to get this done.
I bet there's somebody in this room that could give sensitivity training for free. And I bet people don't report because they don't feel safe. And the reason that I would make it a priority is because it sounds like and it feels like this is a long, unattended need. I believe in setting priorities. I believe in balancing the budget and not jumping off to meet the needs of one particular group over another. But if this is, as I suspect, an unattended need, then we can check with the police department. And I bet they feel it's a priority too.
I'm rebuttal free at this point. Yeah.
All right. In a recent survey by the Gay, Lesbian, and Straight Education Network, 84% of LGBT youth reported that they sometimes or frequently heard homophobic comments in their schools and that their faculty or staff either never or rarely intervened after such comments. 69% of LGBT students surveyed reported verbal harassment. 65% reported sexual harassment. 42% reported physical harassment such as shoving and hitting, and 21% reported physical assault, being beaten, punched, kicked, etc. And 90% of transgendered youth reported feeling completely unsafe in school. In addition, a report from the National Longitudinal Study of Adolescents found that gay teens are 2 times more likely than their heterosexual peers to attempt suicide, presumably because of such harassment. Here in Missoula, students face both verbal and physical harassment in our schools on a daily basis. As mayor, how would you take a leadership role in encouraging and or pressuring the school board to A, implement anti-harassment policies in every school in the city, B, require LGBT sensitivity training for all school faculty, administrators, counselors, and police officers, and C, support gay-straight alliances in all of the schools?
Well, the main thing you have to realize is the school board is its own world unto itself. We used to meet as a council on a regular basis with the school board, and that was discontinued at least 2 or 3 years ago. That would be one of the first things I would do as mayor, is to start meeting, or actually continue meeting, because the mayor meets with the school board, and I would continue that, and I would invite the full school board to meet with the council. We need to build that relationship regardless of anything else. That relationship is vital. The school board is influencing how we plan our city and where growth is happening. So we need to meet with them on a number of issues. And the basis there would be building relationship. And once you have a relationship that you feel like you can bring things up, then you start talking about things like bullying, like beating, like alliances, all those things that are vital to you. I can't imagine as a child, I grew up, went to 12 years of Catholic school. You can bet we had no gay people in our school. They wouldn't allow that. So I would need to be educated. And then I could hopefully educate the council as well as the school board and help them open up and feel comfortable and be aware of these situations.
I think as mayor you can set a tone, and I think you can serve as a catalyst, and I'd be happy to do that. But ultimately the responsibility for talking to the school board about these issues, I think, lies with the folks who have the issues and who are best suited to talk about them and to confront the school board with them and to try to make things change. I'm happy to help with that, but that's not a job that a mayor can do alone by a long shot. And it may not be something that the community can do alone. We may need some help, but certainly, these are extraordinarily difficult issues, and they're painful issues. But it starts with folks talking, and folks caring, and folks paying attention. And if you want to make change in your community, you gotta speak up.
And I think it would be wise for us, even as mayoral candidates, to start thinking about having a community conversation about those beatings, about the violence that goes on underneath the surface. I would welcome that and find out a way, how could we make that happen? Where do we have that conversation? Who moderates it? How do we make people feel comfortable enough to talk about things that go on? That would be a first step.
Thanks.
Just a point of procedure. I think we skipped. I think that was John supposed to get the first answer there, so we'll give him the first answer in the next 2 ones. How about that?
But Spider, it's harder to go first.
Well, okay. Students aren't the only...
That apparently didn't work. Okay.
Yeah. We're going to be tough.
Have you had sensitivity training?
Okay, back on track.
Oh, you gotta laugh a little.
Yeah. Okay. Students aren't the only people being discriminated against in Missoula schools. Lesbian and gay teachers are actively discouraged from being out at their jobs, fearing loss of employment. In addition, forcing lesbian and gay teachers to stay in the closet sends a message to students, both gay and straight, that there is something wrong with being gay, and therefore that it is all right to discriminate against anyone perceived to be gay or lesbian, and in some instances that it's okay to commit violence against them. As a mayor pledged to take an active leadership role in the city, which you both are, what specific actions would you take to get the school board to institute a non-discrimination policy for lesbian and gay faculty and staff?
And again, I think Luann's point about the fairly clear distinction between city government and the school board, is pertinent here. Having said that, again, I'm happy to serve as a catalyst, but you want to make change at the school board, you got to rattle the school board's cage. I think it's as simple and as complicated as that.
You know, it would be wise, because I have worked in a group that tried to work through the budget issues with the school board, and we would put on community discussions, and we would invite the school board so that they aren't the focus. And that might be a good way, and I don't know if they're listening, we love the school board, but you know, nobody, if you put people on the mark, or you start pointing fingers at people, they get defensive. And so what we do is we invite them to participate in a community conversation about these issues. We say you're welcome, that your role is vital to the peace of mind and to the safety of the children of this town, and we need you.
John, did you have? Okay. This is a short one. Missoula's LGBT citizens are not currently protected by an employment discrimination ordinance. Some cities have actually asked that any contracted services and any companies that contract to do work for the city have employment discrimination or non-discrimination in their policy. As mayor, would you support such an ordinance for Missoula citizens? And if so, how would you proceed in getting this passed? To John.
To the degree that such an ordinance would have teeth in our community, I'd be happy to support it. I think it needs to be supported on a state level, and I think it needs to be supported on a national level. Discrimination is discrimination, and it's wrong.
You know, in '99, we passed a living wage ordinance that applied to the city and anyone who had contracts with the city. This kind of thing, this kind of ordinance or resolution or policy could be applied in the same way, and then that could be used as a role model.
Do you plan on reaching out to organizations such as the Missoula AIDS Council to tackle problems of prevention, awareness, and discrimination against people with HIV/AIDS? And what will you propose as strategies for promoting HIV/AIDS related education and services for underserved and high-risk populations in Missoula?
I plan on reaching out to so many different organizations that the city has not reached out to, and this would be one. And I think it would be great to work with the health department and put on a TV commercial with the mayor talking about AIDS awareness and how to prevent AIDS in our town and what it means, and make it an open subject for people to be more knowledgeable about. And I think the mayor could do a good job at that.
And I'm happy to help in any way I can. I suspect that if I'm privileged enough to be elected, there's going to be a lot of reaching out and a lot of reaching in. And again, striking that balance. But there are many remarkably worthy causes that I think the mayor can champion. And to the degree possible, I'll champion as many of them as I can.
Sounds like a plan.
All right. This is the last prepared question, and then after this we'll have the candidates ask one another a question. Oh, okay, and Spider's going to come down and gather any questions that you all might have, go through them quickly, and again we'll try to get to as many of them as we can. So the final question is, domestic partner registries have become an effective way for cities, counties, and even some states to provide a legal framework for domestic partners. Over 60 local governments have created registries, from Ann Arbor, Michigan to Chapel Hill, North Carolina. While the majority of registers in the United States do not confer any rights to unmarried couples, they are often used to assist employers, hospitals, businesses, and other organizations in drafting more inclusive policies for all families. Hospital visitation rights, health benefits, and even rights to inherit are some of the policies that have been more easily extended to unmarried couples since the inception of domestic partner registries. As mayor of the city of Missoula, would you actively support a domestic partner registry? And if so, How would you work with the city council to create such a measure? And I think it's Luann's
Okay.
turn now to answer this first.
I would support something like that. I can't imagine having a loved one dying in the hospital and not being able to see that person or be with them. So I would support it, and I'm not sure what the mechanism is for creating a directory. Would it have to come through the city council, or?
It could. Many domestic partner registries have been actually created by city councils, and actually even more have been created, or actually, no, I'm sorry, most of them have been city councils, all of them, except for one was created by a ballot initiative in Cleveland Heights, Ohio.
Well, the city has taken the policy to support domestic partner health care, and so I can see where the city council, if that resolution or ordinance were brought through, would be able to support that.
And I can't imagine having a problem with it, Christopher. Though, given the tone of the conversation tonight, I'd have to know a little bit more about the privacy issues that come with that. But no, we actually at the city we stole the template, as it were, for domestic partner benefits from the county. I mean, having those systems in place is really helpful.
That's good.
And you are right. One of the issues with some citizens is privacy, but of course, it's a voluntary registry, so and it's also confidential. But it is an issue of some people to be on such a registry. Okay, so now we have the time for you guys to ask a question of one another, and so we just started with you, Luann, right? So we'll start. John, would you like to ask your opponent any questions?
Sure.
Yeah, we're going to give 2 minutes to answer the question, yeah, and 1 minute rebuttals.
Luann, you have served as a city council person for 9 years, and I've asked this question before. What legislation are you most proud of?
Well, I haven't passed the legislation I'm going to be most proud of. I'm working on a dark sky ordinance. I'm not sure if all of you know what that means. Right now, we waste billions of dollars in this country shining lights up into the sky. It's called sky glow, and we waste energy. We also waste energy through light trespass. When we put our lights on and we go over our neighbor's yard, or you're next to a commercial building and their light is shining in your bedroom. We also have to suffer through glare, so that as we get older and our eyes weaken and we're trying to drive at night, it's harder on us. It's a quality of life issue. Most people, when they hear about dark sky, they say, thank God. It's like the folks who move out into the country and then put a light on a 30-foot pole. And it means that we have this quality of life and this unique character of the last best place, but we're shining it away. And what we want to do through an ordinance that says in any new construction, we keep our lighting down, we keep it appropriate, but we make sure that it's safe. So that's what I'm working on doing.
Speaking of lighting,
No kidding.
I got a little trespass going on here.
A little glare. My turn? So we've already kind of covered this, John.
He gets
Oh, a second question?
No, I appreciate that Luann's doing that.
How will you reach out to the LGBT community?
I think in the same way that I'll reach out to the rest of the community, and that is having an open door, a relatively open personality, I hope, a phone number that's nothing but available, and I'll try to provide as much opportunity for conversation as I have as somebody who's lived here for 41 years. Folks with issues don't hesitate to seek us out, and I think it's part of my responsibility to occasionally seek folks out as well. Again, it's striking a balance.
Luann, did you have anything?
No?
Are there any more questions? Did I get everybody's?
Okay, well, we have quite a few here, but we'll start plugging away at them and see. Oh, we do have one more. All right. Yeah, same time, definitely. So the first question is, what have you learned about LGBT issues since the first debate 2 weeks ago at the community center town hall meeting? So I guess just 2 weeks ago there was another forum.
Well, I think we were both shocked to learn that you could lose your job because you were gay. So I've tried to investigate the laws since then. And our Constitution gives us equal protection, but our statutes don't. And that's where we have the work to do. I've also learned that I have a lot to learn. And you guys are funny as heck.
I'd say funny as hell, actually.
Funny as hell.
I'm willing to go that far. Really, I had a similar experience. I was shocked at anecdotally, we heard that someone had been fired, and the turn of phrase, "You're being fired because you're gay," and I can tell you that any number of attorneys I talk to are willing to distribute cards freely to help with those issues and some others. So, these issues of discrimination for any group are disturbing to me. I don't like to think that Missoula is a place that discrimination is tolerated and exercised, and that's difficult, and it's hard to swallow, and it's a challenge, and it continues to be an eye opener, and that's what running for mayor is about, is having your eyes open to a lot of things, and I suspect there'll be more to come.
In thumbing through these questions, the theme of all of these is specifics. So with that in mind, this question sort of encapsulates that. Beyond conversation and relationship, what tangible things would you do or put into effect to decrease the hate and violence that threaten our citizens?
I would continue to spend money on having police officers on the street. We added 6 this year. I want to say we did 7 last year, Mark, is that right? Something like that. That's important. It's tangible, and it helps take care of that piece of business.
Hate and violence. What do you do specifically for hate and violence? I think the main thing is education. So there's sensitivity training for the police. There's sensitivity training for city employees. I have said in the past that I would be doing a monthly call-in show for the mayor. I think you start getting people on MCAT talking about this. Sounds like to me education is one of the key components in changing this atmosphere. And then you ask the people who are experiencing the hate and violence what the general community needs to do. And then you follow through on that.
I'm going to ask 2 questions, because the first question is simply a yes or no question. So this person wants to know specifically for LGBT, so do you support a hate crimes ordinance for the LGBT community, yes or no? And John, or Luann, I guess.
I support a hate crime ordinance.
Yes, okay.
I think I support a hate crimes ordinance.
Okay, all right.
I haven't seen one yet.
Okay, yeah, that's true, you have to look up it. Okay, so then I'm going to ask this one too. Now, since you both have been on city council for some time, what have you done for the LGBT community during your time in city government? And we'll start with Luann, because that was a...
Well, I feel like whatever we do for citizens, we're doing for the LGBT community. I've stood up for citizens. I've made it a point to involve people so that they may have a voice in the decisions that impact their lives. And if they've been involved in neighborhood issues, other issues that come before us, that has been what I've based my decisions on, to make sure that they feel empowered. And I'm not always sure if I'm talking to somebody from the LGBT community. And I've worked with folks across all the wards, not just in my own, because what we've been going through over the last few years has affected this whole community. The change we're seeing in our land use policies, the change because we're going through the throes of growth. So I feel like whomever I've touched, I've tried to do that for them.
two things specifically. Thanks to the leadership of my colleague Heidi Kendall on City Council, and Stacy Rye and others, including Luann, who supported domestic partner benefits. We have domestic partner benefits as City of Missoula. Second, I voted against an occupancy standard ordinance that defined a family as folks who were related, an ordinance that I believe was discriminatory and unenforceable. I voted against it once. That ordinance prevailed. The mayor vetoed that ordinance, and I voted to support the mayor's veto, and that ordinance is not on the books today.
What have you done, and if elected, what will you do to improve access and safety to the disabled community? In other words, the crossing of Broadway and Burton, removal of curbs at the street crossing so we don't have to ride in the street. Please be specific, not general.
Well, the day that they had their, I'm not sure what you would call it, when they kept crossing the street again and again, kind of a sting operation to show people what it meant for them to try to cross the street, I went over and talked to them after a committee meeting, and I experienced how incredibly vulnerable they are. And so I said that I would work with them, that I was aware. We've been told that they have to drive to manage somehow to get down the sidewalks that don't have the curb cuts, that have really difficult ways for them to get down to the light. Now, we're working on the West Broadway project, and these improvements I expect will be part of that West Broadway project. Again, that community came forward and told us what the problems were. Way back in '92, I guess they told the Public Works Department, we're going to have a hard time, and that's when we should have taken care of their being able to cross the street. But now it's come full circle again, and they are asking us, and we're responding.
So I trot this one out occasionally. I'd have been here sooner, folks, but I took West Broadway. The traffic issues at West Broadway are complicated, and I think we've responded in the best way we can given the constraints that we have. State doesn't want us to put a light at California and Broadway, nor do they want us to put a light at Burton and Broadway. So we've narrowed the lanes, we've put pinned down curbs to create pedestrian facilities. And I spent about an hour there this afternoon from about 4:15 until a little after 5, kind of experiencing it from a pedestrian standpoint. And I have to tell you, from a pedestrian standpoint, works pretty well. And I think folks are getting used to it when they're in their cars. There's a little bit of a learning curve, as there often is with change, and the facilities aren't complete. One of the big deals down there is going to be actually having street lights. With luck, there'll be nice dark skies street lights, but they'll help illuminate that passage so that folks can be safe there at night. So as a council person, I've advocated for changes on Broadway, as has Luann. We've gotten there, I think, ultimately, and I think Luann's on the same page here as well. I think ultimately the solution for West Broadway is to create a beautiful street like Stevens Avenue has become, a street that works for vehicles, and that's the first time I've seen the orange hanky. I'm sorry, it surprised me for a moment. Streets that work for cars, pedestrians, and bikes, and it's also beautiful. Provides a nice gateway. Thank you.
I have to tell you, I'm not going to read through all these. There's some pretty angry things on these cards. I'm just going to let you know that. But I will read one that's in the angry vein that's not insulting.
Okay.
I don't know what that means. I think the community's pretty upset. how would you respond to the fact that a police liaison comes now when a straight person is beaten for believed to being gay, but not when a gay person is targeted? Are you listening to the LGBT community today from LGBT awareness or from a straight person's awareness?
I reckon I'm listening from a straight person's awareness. Having a liaison, I think, is a great first step. A lot of this is about incrementalism, and change sometimes grinds slowly. The fact that we had an officer volunteer to be a liaison, I think, is a big deal, and I think it speaks highly of the officer, and frankly, it speaks highly of our force. I'm glad that we're moving in that direction. It's not always going to be fast enough, and it's not always going to be enough, but we're going to try to move forward.
I'm not going to say I can understand the frustration, but I can imagine there's quite a bit of frustration. Not just frustration, anger, hatred, and wanting to react and demand attention and response from the leaders, from the police. So this is where we are now, and this is where we start to chart the course for a better future. And we all have to take responsibility, trust me, I understand, about strong feelings about certain things. And let's set up venues so that we can express those feelings. You have every right to have a venue that says, I feel like I've been screwed over, or my community has been screwed over, I haven't been acknowledged, I haven't been respected. And then where do we go from there? That's the important part. If you know now, it may not be the right timing, but now people are listening. As mayor, I will make a bridge. I will come to you. And together we'll build that future.
I think you're right. It's coming out of frustration, but I also think it's coming out of fear too. I mean, this is our hometown, and I think a lot of us are definitely questioning our safety in a city with the history of how things have been handled. Anyway, let me ask this question, which also relates to this. What makes you think that, regardless of the amount of sensitivity training and police liaisons, that the Missoula Police Department is really serious about rectifying their despicable record in regards to the LGBT community? And then the last question is, would you support a community patrol to kind of supplement what the Missoula Police Department has historically refused to do? And I just want to actually address that piece. The Missoula Police Department actually has had historically 2 police on a walking beat downtown Missoula. Now, what we found out, though, and this is from a representative of the Missoula Police Department, is those 2 were set out in downtown specifically to go through bars to stop underage drinking, and not specifically to help with safety issues. So now I believe that they are going to be having those policemen actually downtown to help with safety issues. But I think it's this question really goes, what more can we do with just 2 cops covering, such a huge area?
I believe is it my turn? Missoula needs to have zero tolerance for hate and fear and violence. So that means cooperation. If we don't have the police, enough police, if we don't have the resources, then we need to figure out ways for people to feel safe. Raising awareness is always the beginning. You want accountability. The police want accountability. Having worked with our police department for 10 years, I don't know all the dark side. We all have a dark side. But I know that when they come in, their intention and their goal is to be accountable, responsible, respectable, and respected in this community. Now, whatever that takes, it has to come from the top. That's the mayor's office. And as John said, you set a tone that we're accountable, that we don't want it happening, and we're going to make sure that we work and we do things, and that's where we need you to tell us, how does it work, what's the best strategy. But I know from working with these people that they respond, and it comes from the top and it goes right down to the guy on the patrol, and that's what can happen.
And I, excuse me, I have a similar experience with our police force. And I have to tell you that part of setting the tone is when you hear words like despicable, everybody's defenses go up right away. And I'm not sure that that helps you move to the next step, which is how do we talk to each other about the important issues that we need to deal with. That's part of what we need to do. We can't spit at each other. We need to have a conversation with each other. And that's not the tone that helps us get there. It's okay to be angry, but at some point you got to let that go and start figuring out what you really want to get done.
There's two more questions that are not redundant, and then does anybody have a burning question that they haven't given to us that they need to? Okay. So we'll get through these, and then I'll give each of you a chance to say something else if you want to, and then wrap it up. This is on a different vein. In a different vein, I live close to the railroad yard. Diesel engines run day and night, flooding the neighborhood with fumes. Is there anything you can do to help me?
I really relate. It's your turn, but I'll take it. I really relate to that. It's harder to go first. The railroad also sprays a lot of pesticides along the railroad tracks. You know, I had talked at one point at one forum we were at about moving the rail yard, and I hadn't checked with MRL before I said that. So my campaign manager and I went over, and we talked a little bit about that, and we found that they had just built this huge barn to store the gasoline for Conoco there. And it made me realize that the city, as far as I can tell, isn't really talking to MRL. We don't know what they're planning for that yard right in the middle of our city that impacts our downtown so much. So, again, you know, I'll try to be as specific as possible. I'm not crazy about the diesel. If we make them aware of it, because we're talking to them now, I am, about a quiet zone downtown. There are 200 whistles that we could stop at Madison and Taylor if we had a quiet zone, if we talked to MRL. There are ways to do that. That would be a relief. And then we start talking to them. What is a necessity? How does it work that this diesel is going on? And how can we change it because it's impacting our downtown? It's a beginning.
You know, I'd be happy to ring the health department's bell on the diesel fume piece. As Lou Ann suggests, I'm guessing nobody's talking about that. So, you know, we live in a city that is sometimes complaint driven. So, once in a while we respond to complaints. But I think that's probably the health department's purview.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we're gonna kind of ask the last question now, and I think we kind of recognize, I think now that we are in a position as the in the LGBT community that we can make a lot of progress. I think having these two people running and either one of them that are in office, I think we can move forward, and so that's why I think this is a perfect question to end on. And the last question is, how do both of you feel you differ from the other concerning the LGBT community? And we'll start with John, I guess.
You know, the distinctions. I think Lou Ann is as open and kind and compassionate a person as you could have running for mayor, and I generally like to think that I'm the same way. I think from a practical standpoint, we probably approach problems differently, and I think I may approach them a little more practically. When there's a question about how we deal with health and safety issues, my suggestion in the case of crimes and assaults is we pay for more police. That's my specific piece of business. I'm a little less about process, I think, and a little more about product. And Luann and I differed on the occupancy standard vote. And I think that's maybe something she's changed her mind about. But I mean, that's a distinction as well. And I think that is I think that's a piece of legislation that clearly would have affected this community, especially if partners had children.
I'll respond to occupancy. It's easy for me. There was a lot of history that went into that occupancy standard coming forward. And we can talk about it tonight, or we can just say people waited for 6 years for the administration to respond to what the neighborhoods felt were changes in the neighborhoods. They were told that they would have help with enforcement or different ordinances. And after 6 years, they got together as a community, all the different neighborhoods, and they brought this forward. The night it came up, I said, this isn't the way we ought to be doing this, but people wanted to push it through. And I voted for it as a way to support those neighborhoods. Under my administration, what I'm going to do is work on the issues. We get to the table, we talk about the issues before we get to an occupancy standard. That divided this community, and that's not what I'm about. As far as being practical, I'm a Virgo. And a Virgo is going to roll up their sleeves. They see a problem, they're going to tackle it. Now, it may not be about product, but it's about getting down with the people who have the problem and working side by side to make a change.
Okay. Thank you both very much for being here. If you would like to, if you have anything you'd like to say in addition, do either of you?
This election is about power, and I'm about sharing power. The administration we have, and I've been part of it for 9 years and I've watched it, tends to be top down. And I want to change that and bring things from the bottom up. A lot of smart people in this town who know what's going on, who have ideas for this town, and they need a venue. We haven't been planning. We have a great future we can plan for. I'm excited to be mayor. I want to have fun. I want to build community. And I want to involve people in that. I want to reconnect people with their government that they're paying for.
So specifically, beyond some of the items we've talked about tonight, I'm very interested as mayor in 3 things. First is I think this community needs to pass another open space bond. We did that 10 years ago. It's made a tremendous difference in our community, our quality of life, and the opportunities for all citizens and their children and their children's children to enjoy that quality of life as we look to the future. I think we need to build more houses in town, and those houses can be attached, and they can be all sorts. We need houses for old folks, we need houses for young folks, we need houses for everybody in between. We need places people can call home and have equity in. I think that equity lets folks become middle class, and I think middle class, in my definition, is you're comfortable enough that you get to make good decisions about your life and how you live it and how you participate in your community and how you work and how you play and how you serve others. And I also believe that we need to work on our rules and regulations, make them a little bit clearer, a little bit easier to work with, and a little bit more consistently enforced. I think if we do those things, we can start working on some other things as well, not the least of which are some of the things we talked about tonight. The other piece of business as an aside is Luann and I often see each other under these circumstances. The lighting's not often this good.
You look lovely, darling.
Thank you very much. It's all about the shirt. And we had a meeting last Thursday, and there were 12 folks in attendance. So I can't tell you how nice it is to come out and see this many faces and this many folks who are engaged in the community. I appreciate your time.
All right, well, that really concludes the forum, and let's give these two a round of applause. And thank you all for attending. Now, as I said before, I don't think this is the end of the event. I think it's just the beginning of really working to make Missoula a better place. And so I really encourage each and every one of you to sign up on the sign-in sheet where you entered. And we're gonna keep in touch with you all and work to get some of these things passed that these two people have been talking about. And again, make it safer, make it a city with more basic rights and a better place to call home. So thanks so much.
And vote, please vote.